And I'm going to say good morning. Welcome to How to Sell Your Listing in Creative Ways. But before we get started, let's go ahead and look at what happens if a buyer walks in, wants to put in a offer, but is unrepresented, right? Let's go back into what we were doing. Okay, so in our buyer folder right here, we have Buyer Listing Advisor Representation Agreement. And this is simply saying that the broker fee, the owner or seller is compensating the listing advisor directly for assisting buyers as part of our professional services for the listing. So therefore, the buyer has no obligation to pay us for a professional fee. And should a contract happen between the buyer and seller eventually lead to a closing, they're not obligated to pay us, right? So there you go. We're not representing them. We're representing the seller in the capacity of a listing agent. They have no business knowing how much we're getting paid, what we're being paid. It's none of their business if we're getting paid extra money or not extra money. That's none of their business. You never need to tell the person on the other side if there's compensation or no compensation for that. It's not their business. Okay. They think by going to you, they can use your compensation as the buy side to get a better deal. Let them think what they want, right? Because with the lawsuits, they feel like they can use your compensation and use it for a better deal. Let them think what they want, right? It's not your business to tell them, no, I'm still going to get paid my 3%. No, that is not what we tell them. It's none of their business how much the seller is going to compensate us. This is simply saying we are going to work because we're representing, we are transaction brokers anyway, guys, but we are representing the seller. So we're going to do our job as a seller. So we're just letting you know you're not going to be represented directly by us because we're going to help with this transaction because we're transaction brokers, but we're working in the capacity of the listing agent.
Hey,
And
Carrie.
yes,
So if the buyer does ask us,
yes. Mm-hmm.
literally putting us on the spot and
Uh-huh.
saying, so because you're not getting commission, since I'm buying directly, I would like to offer that. If he asks, is the seller paying commission? We just
The
deny.
seller's not, you're not worried about any commission because you are not being represented based on commission. I'm getting paid for my listing services, and that's not part of your agreement. You have no business asking about what my listing commission is. Are you on the listing side? Is this your home? If you're
Yeah,
listing a home, you
got
have
it.
every right to know what my listing commission is. But this has nothing to do with your buy side.
Okay, question number 2 on the same subject, and I'm sorry to
No,
ask,
no,
but
no. But they need to know that and they need to be put in their place. If they're not an agent, they don't get commission. So they don't get to use your commission. Okay,
Mhm.
go ahead.
When they say.
Oh, very good. And the part 2 of the question was,
Well, okay.
way back when I used to put on the listing agreement
Uh-huh.
that, especially if it was a repeat client,
Uh-huh.
that if buyer, and the very last and additional comments, if agent brings a buyer, agent commission will drop to, let's say if it's 6%, will drop to 5% or 5.5.
Well,
The
again,
listing agreement.
this doesn't matter because again, this is only if the buyer's saying that could be in the case that the buyer's still paying you, right? This is really more in the case that the buyer is like, I am not being represented. You follow me? Because
Yeah.
what you're saying could be someone who's like, oh, I'll pay you your commission of 3%. And then you could be getting some from that buyer and some from the seller, right? So in your instance, you could continue to do that. That's not necessarily this case. You follow
Okay.
me? Because in that case, the seller's still paying you the buy side commission, and yeah, it'd be reduced because you're covering both sides. It doesn't matter, right? And it's none of their business what they're agreed to pay you.
Okay.
So the seller has agreed to pay you regardless, whether you're acting as the buy side because they've already put in the listing agreement, you're acting as the buy side, or whether they said, I'm not paying commission, but in the case that there's an unrepresented buyer, I will pay you anyway. That's what this is about, right? So either way, listen, if the seller's like, I'm not paying commission, but if there's an unrepresented seller, you could say, listen, I'm not going to pay you if there's an unrepresented buyer. Then you're not going to handle that unrepresented buyer. You understand me? You don't work for free. Why would you do that? Because if you asked during the listing agreement, they said, we are not offering buy-side compensation. And you said, in the case of an unrepresented buyer, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to let him go? Or will you be willing to pay me more? Let him go. Then you say to the unrepresented buyer, I'm sorry, the seller has advised me that they do not want to work with unrepresented buyers. If the seller has directed you that way, you are allowed to say that. As long as you're not violating fair housing, you are allowed to share what the seller has advised you what they're allowed to do. Just like if the seller says, I'm not accepting an offer below XYZ number, the listing's at 1.5, they don't want to see anything below 1.3 or whatever the number is, 500 under 2, whatever, it doesn't matter. You are always allowed to say, the seller has directed me not to receive any offers below this number. Please tell your buyer and you're welcome to submit another offer. Any of those things are, I mean, I hate to tell you this because it's disgusting, but if your seller is a FERPTA, and if he says, I don't want to accept any offers where they will not waive withholding, Lord above, you would be allowed to do that. Don't do it because it's Slim Shady, but truly, I mean, that's an ethical thing in my opinion, but in reality, that is also allowed. I hate it. I wouldn't do it, but that is truly even allowed in MLS. You're allowed to put that. God awful horrible. Please do not be that agent. I don't like it, but in reality, that is allowed. It's horrible. I think it's awful and I don't want any part of it and I will not put it in the MLS, but that is actually allowed. So you just cannot violate any fair housing. Are we clear on that? So if the seller is not willing to pay when you're at the listing agreement, at the listing table, and they said, I am not willing to pay a co-broke, I'll see if an offer comes in, blah, blah, blah. And you say, well, what in the case of an unrepresented buyer? And they say, let him go. Because this is really where this is most important, right? Then if someone says, and get that in writing, put it in the listing agreement so you have it in writing, because an unrepresented buyer would be that curmudgeon who might come after you, okay? So you have in writing that the seller says, I do not want to work with unrepresented buyers. Then you can clearly say, I'm sorry, the seller has directed me that they are not willing to take any kind of offers from an unrepresented buyer.
Carrie, what is our duties to the unrepresented buyer?
None.
So we don't write the contract. What if they ask for comparables? We don't have
No.
to do any of that.
No, they're unrepresented.
So they write their own contract.
That's exactly right. They're unrepresented. They should be doing those things because that's the whole point. They're not paying you a commission.
So why don't I give them a non-rep?
You can give them a non-rep disclosure, but that's not what I'm talking about here. They still have to sign that. You can do both.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
well, not for them. For the deal, you're a transaction broker, but you are doing no representation on it. You are not, you are not representing them, correct? We are not changing our brokerage representation to non-representation,
No.
but you are not representing them. Absolutely. Yeah, you can be clear to them, this is no representation to you. The reality is, guys, at the end of the day, we're still transaction broker. They can still sue us. And this is the problem. This is what people don't understand. Your liability is huge when you deal with no representation. Like Emily had an offer with somebody who was no representation wanting to waive all inspections. You know what that says? Red flag, red flag, red flag. Yeah, those people will be the people that will sue us. And if we're not collecting anything, guess what? We're still totally liable. We're still totally liable for that. So yes, these are huge things. And these are the questions you should be having in a listing appointment with your sellers. In the case, I would always ask it of an unrepresented buyer. Do you want to work with them? How do you feel about that? There's an additional liability that comes with an unrepresented buyer. Do you still want to receive their offers? You need to ask them. If they do, that's great. If they don't, put it in the listing agreement, or you say, if they may say, make sure that they're working with an attorney. It doesn't matter what they say. It just needs to be what they say. You follow me? Because then when you say to the buyer, I'm sorry, the seller has directed me that they want to make sure the unrepresented buyer has some kind of representation, then they're not willing to deal with it unrepresented. It doesn't matter, right? Because it's not from you. Because they're going to look to put you in the bad seat as the agent who's trying to collect money, which is what they did to Emily with this email that they sent. That is not the case. And that's why you can never talk to them about commission. They don't need to know anything about your commission. It's none of their business, right? Everybody clear on that? And the form here simply says you're disclosing to them that you're going to continue to work in the capacity helping because you're working under the capacity of a listing agent for your seller. That's the whole point of this. Does that make sense? It says nothing about what fees you're getting paid. It says they're not paying it.
Just like they can come and we can open the door for them. there's not a fee.
Exactly right. Is everyone clear on that? Because,
Here, I got a question.
what was that?
I have a
Question?
question about that.
Yeah, go ahead. Mhm.
How would, you said the buyer would represent themselves, how would that mean that they would obviously have to get an attorney, correct?
They would
Or
obviously have to
representing
what?
themselves, getting an attorney, right?
Well, this is the problem, right? And this is exactly, so oftentimes you see it, people who are realtors in other states and they want to represent themselves here. It's usually not a complete layperson. It's maybe somebody who's an investor and maybe they've got their hands on some Florida realtor contract and maybe they're just filling it in. It's usually something like that. If it's someone who has an attorney, what do we care, right? Because they have an attorney, so we don't really care. Right? Because then they're not really unrepresented, right? At least they're utilizing an attorney. Does that make sense, Blake?
I guess how would an unrepresented buyer fill out a FAR contract is what I'm asking. Like, how would they-
Exactly right. That is exactly my question. But if you're a realtor from another state, you probably could fill in a FAR, right? Because you fill in contracts other places. So, and maybe you have a friend who's a realtor here and you got a hold of a FAR and you just filled it in, right? Don't think that doesn't happen all day long, right? And so you think that you're pretty clever and you're just going to do it unrepresented here because you're a realtor somewhere else. And but in that case, why wouldn't you just do it and take the referral fee? So I don't understand how all that's helping, but 9 out of 10 times, we're just seeing more of this is what I'm saying. And you just need to be prepared for it. But this is what I saw, someone sending you their terms in an email. Well, that's good. That's not an offer. Now, Emily's person did have a contract and they did fill out a contract. So where did she get it? I don't know. Maybe she got it online. You could get anything online, right? So I'm not sure. But the point is, we don't want to be liable for it. That's a huge red flag of liability. And then you're waiving your inspection. Lord help us all. That's a big, bad, ugly thing right there. And I don't want to have any part of that. So this is where I'm saying when you have a list, and even if you're in a contract currently right now, I would have a conversation with your sellers and get something on paper, how they feel about an unrepresented buyer. Because these people are out there, guys. And before you have to deal with it without knowing what your sellers think, I would have the conversation ahead because they may feel differently when you're at that moment and then later regret it. Right? So it's better to have the conversation before you're faced with it because this was a full price offer. So with a full price offer, they might go, oh, but is it a full price offer? No inspections, not paying commission, but am I, you know what I mean? It's like, there's something wrong there, right? I mean, it's like a ticking time bomb. So you have to, it's a slippery slope. I'm just going to tell you. So there's got to be, when it's too good to be true sometimes.
So wait, it was a full asking price.
She had another one.
And he didn't want to use her as a realtor. But the seller was gonna pay the commission anyways. So what's he think, he's gonna get it cheaper? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, well, so they thought without using the commission of the buy side, because they were clearly saying, and they wrote in the agreement that the buyer and seller agree the seller would not pay any commissions for a buyer's commission. See, you can't do that. Yeah, and they're trying to say that, they're going against the lawsuit. And see, this is where it gets slim shady. So you just, yeah. And the problem is, this is the people who will cause a problem, turn you in, do all sorts of nasty stuff. But luckily we had another full price offer, another cash offer. So the seller can, and we had it before, so it worked out better. But but these kinds of things can get ugly. Most importantly, though, I'm going to say one more time before we dive into our other thing, which is more important to me because we want to sell our stuff, but do be the most careful about never and I'm going to say never again, never talk commissions with these people because they're all going to try to talk about your commission. It's none of their business. They don't have to know anything about your commission, and you do not have to disclose anything about your commission. It's none of their business. You're disclosing here that they don't have to pay anything. They don't need to know anything more than that. It's none of their business. Just like it's a code of ethics for an agent on the other side to ask you about your listing commission. It's none of their business.
I had an actual real estate broker put in writing on, an offer a couple of days ago that it was up to me whether or not we moved forward regarding the compensation, and I responded that, no, it's up to my son. from a-
Yeah. Exactly.
I said,
And I'm just going to say one other stupid thing that came up because it was retarded. Who was it? Who was it? I can't remember. It was maybe you, Teresa. It was someone really good who had a really stupid person on the other side. Oh, it's you, Linda. Yeah. EXP agent. I love it. I love EXP. We have an offer. We're the seller. They said that they put it in on seller to buyer's broker. And we tried to say we need seller's broker to buyer's broker. They said our broker will not accept seller's broker to buyer's broker. So I had to send back a screenshot of the listing agreement showing 10A and 10B. And I had to explain it depends. The reason that there's two is it depends on which one is selected in the listing agreement. So your brokerage can use whichever one they want, but you don't get to dictate which one our brokerage uses. And if you want to get paid, you'll use the one we do or you won't get paid. Thanks for playing. I mean, what is wrong with these people?
so much.
So that's EXP. We don't really care what they use on their listing, but if they want to get paid with us, they need to understand they need to use our forms. People are idiots. Okay.
Well,
So
I mean,
that's it.
now we gotta be very careful on who, like, if an agent calls us, say, is your seller paying a compensation to the buyer's agent?
We don't have to be careful in that. If the seller has agreed to pay, they can pay. There's nothing wrong with that. They've agreed to pay. But how much they've agreed to pay is negotiable based upon the offer. And that's what people need to understand.
What Carrie said the violation is how much you're getting it. They don't have to.
Yeah, the violation is how much is our list side?
How much
They can't talk about that. How much and if we're representing and receiving the buy side, it's none of the damn business on if we're representing as a buyer. They don't need to know our side. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In other words, your paycheck is front.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, any questions on anything we just covered? Because we're going to dive into the other side. Everybody good on that? Okay.
Carrie, how does our E&O cover this situation?
Well, that's a great question because it depends on what the lawsuit would be, right? So E&O covers errors and omissions. So it depends on what the error was or what we omitted. So that's really what the question is, right? So if someone came after us and said that we did something wrong with compensation, it depends on did we truly do something wrong? Errors and omissions doesn't cover you if you are found at fault. But as long as you've not done anything at fault, you're totally covered. So I've not seen anything about errors and omissions coming up with this. Usually errors and omissions comes up with like non-disclosure. Honestly, most of all lawsuits that I have seen come through my office have been lack of disclosure. I'm going to tell you, Florida Realtors at board of directors meetings every year, we see all the lawsuits, and the largest percentage of lawsuits is always lack of disclosure. So I'm going to tell you, when you have sellers filling out the seller's disclosure and they just don't write it and they go, oh, I don't know, I never lived there. Don't do that. That is the worst thing they could ever do. At least write, I don't know on each one. Lack of disclosure, number one lawsuits, number one thing you guys are being sued for because you get dragged on in because they say, has anyone heard of culpable negligence? That means you should have known, right? So if you walk in a house and you see the black mold on the ceiling and then you go back and it's white, you should have noticed that they painted over that. There probably was a mold situation there, which probably came from moisture. We probably had a leak at some point, right? So these are things that you could be held accountable for, right? You're going to get dragged into that lawsuit. I'm going to tell you that right now. So these things are called culpable negligence. Those are the things that you get dragged in for. Trust me, I have been on many sides of these. It's super fun. such a fun part of my job. But yeah, every one of them that I have been dragged into has all been due to lack of disclosure. Now, people love to drag me in because saying that I hold them in listing agreements. Yeah, those are fun. They never go anywhere because guess what? That's what our listing agreement says. So yeah, that's never gone anywhere. But errors and omissions, actually, Keith, to your question, those are really all the errors and omissions ones that I have seen through my offices. And we always have all the correct documentation. So but I can't answer anything about commissions. I used to see them at the board all the time for procuring costs. The one thing I will tell you on my thought leader meeting that came up on Friday, Glenn, who's an attorney and runs 4 offices out of Michigan, he brought up a really interesting point that is still being brought up with NAR. Procuring cause was one thing that was being protected through code of ethics, right? Well, we don't know if procuring cause is still a thing because first of all, now with the buyer broker agreements, it's not about procuring cause anymore, right? And that's the biggest part of really one of the things that the code of ethics protected us on. But there are a couple other procuring cause issues that have come up. And so, that's one of the issues that we still see is we have not seen a lot of the board. I'm just going to say we used to be inundated with procuring cause cases, and I've just not seen any of them on the board lately at all. So that's an interesting thing, but I have not seen, so errors and omissions, I just have not seen a reason for any of that for commissions. All right, so moving on, let's get to the meat and potatoes of what we were going to go through today. Let's make this large and in charge. Okay. Slideshow, play from the start. All right. All right. You guys can all see that? Isn't it pretty? Yes. So let's talk about how to sell your listings in a creative way. Yeah? Anybody like that idea? So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We know inventory has risen, which means more options and more negotiation power. So active listings are up. They're about double all over town. Compared to last year. So we're all over Orlando, we're hovering between, I'd say, 4 to 6 months of supply. So that means buyers are now having greater choice and leverage, and sellers have to be strategic, not only in their pricing, but in their presentation to stand out. Okay. Now, remember, we talked about this in the sales meeting on Thursday. What is 6 months? It's a balanced market. Okay, we are not in a buyer's market. And I'd say 6 months, the most inventory out of all my offices is Ocala. The second highest is actually Dr. Phillips, which is interesting. But again, it's a balanced market. And real estate is hyper-local, guys. So one neighborhood might be really tight and everybody wants to live there, and another neighborhood may have tons of inventory. So again, you have to know your neighborhood where you're selling. Right? Hey, Daphne. And you have to be able to understand one neighborhood versus another. If you're doing comps, you can't be pulling just in a 1 mile radius. You really got to be pulling within your neighborhood because each neighborhood is specifically hyper local, right? So when you're in a balanced market, it's even more important to know the stats per neighborhood, because certain neighborhoods will move more than others, more so in a balanced market than in a seller's market. I mean, my God, it didn't matter, right? You put out a sign, which I hated, and any person could sell. It was horrible. I really like a balanced market personally. You need to have really good marketing to sell, and you can sell it much better, and you need to know what you're doing. But you can really work the market so much better, and you can stand out for being a market expert in a balanced market for both your buyers and sellers. When you're in one sector or another, buyers or sellers, it's harder to do that. I'm going to tell you that. Like in a seller's market, I mean, like I said, you just put a sign out. It's harder to stand out and be that person, right? Because anybody could have done it. It was horrible. But in a balanced market, you have that opportunity to shine. I'm going to tell you, I really like a balanced market. I know it sounds crazy, but I do. Okay, so with these increasing days on market, it does feel like there's a cooling trend. Okay. So homes are averaging anywhere from 6 to 10 days more year over year, right? And it depends on where you are. So what does that make it feel like? This intense rapid fire pace that we've been feeling, it feels like people are like, oh my God, the homes are taking forever. That's a little dramatic, guys. I'm going to tell you, because really, some places are about 45 days, some places are 50 days. Ocala's in the 70s. It just depends. 70 days. I mean, seriously, there were times it used to take 180 days easy to sell a home. That was normal. There was a reason we always took year-long listing agreements because it took a year to sell a home. Okay. That was like, many of you weren't around then, but I'm a granny. No. No, but the reality is, right, Maria, you remember, it was very common 6 months. Like you'd be like, listen, we're only 4 months in. I mean, this is a new listing, right? So the fact that, 70 some odd, 72 is probably our longest days on market, that's still not bad, right? And again, it's hyper local. Some things take longer, listen, farms, let's be real, is going to take the longest. We know that, right? High dollar though, here in Orlando actually moves pretty well. And that's another thing we're going to talk about. Okay. So let's look at here. We know what's also happened. We've got some high mortgage and high insurance. And this is what's kind of been suppressing some of our demand. So our rates have been around 6.75 to 7. So that has cooled some of what anybody would have bought, right? We know that. When it was 2 to 3, I mean, even if you didn't want to buy, you bought, right? You're like, I just got to buy a house. It's so cheap, right? Yeah, it's just free money, right? And then, of course, we've got Florida, some of the highest insurance costs. It is improving. We're fighting it all the time in DC and Tallahassee. We're there, we're fighting for it, but it is getting better slowly. But guys, better than California. But listen, when I moved here, I probably paid, $2,000 a year for my home insurance. It's not quite that anymore, right? It's probably about $6,000 a year now, right? So obviously that is kind of a problem. Now that's putting some buyers, right, out of the market. Now we know that, but let's also be clear. Are those our buyers? Not really. It's not really our buyers. It's some buyers, but it's not truly our buyers. So our legislative wins are working towards helping those buyers. We're putting more money into first-time home buyer programs. We're doing more to bring down insurance costs. We're helping even with the condo costs. So we are working towards that. But let's be honest, and this is what the luxury market has continued to move. And guys, we thankfully are fortunate. We need to keep that in our mind because that is where we are. Not all of the homes, but we are there. So what does that mean for your listings? Now, we don't all have high ultra dollar, but we have to be creative, each listing one at a time. So let's say you have a condo. You have to face what people are afraid of. You can't just look at the beautiful view, the beautiful lifestyle. That's how we used to sell condos, right? Oh, the white glove or this or the wonderful amenities or the location. You're right next to, downtown, what is that called? Restaurant Row and Dr. Phillips and nobody cares. They're afraid as hell about, what are they talking about? The milestone reports, right? They're afraid of those integrity reports, the integrity reserve study. How much is it going to cost to bring this building up to par, right? That's what they're afraid of. What is that building that Lisa just sold and Anna just sold right over here? When you went in there, when we went in for Lisa's broker open, one of the elevators was down. They had the air blowing in it. I mean, what did it scream? Deferred maintenance. I mean, scary, right? These are the things. Now, luckily, they did actually fix these things. They did actually have a plan. They did already hit the homeowners with the incentives to do it. Not the incentives. They weren't incentives. They were the assessments. They already hit them with the assessments. Certainly didn't incentivize them, but they had to do it, right? But let's face it, guys. No, but the positive is this. That's what we had to come out of market with. We said incentives, not incentives. I like that word. Assessments already paid. That's what we went in. We went and we did a whole marketing campaign with Anna. Assessments already paid, milestone reserve done, milestone report done, integrity study, integrity study done, and assessments paid. You're going into a building complete. That's what people want to know, right? And if you're going to put money in, don't take it off the price of the home. Prepay the HOA. Right? Because that's what's scaring people away. So if you've got a condo, don't go in with your eyes closed. That's what they're afraid of. You better call it right out. And if it's a building that those things haven't been done at, you better get really creative before you take that listing and find out everything about how old is that building. You guys, you got to know that stuff, right? Because listen, if it's a building, what is the years here that it has to have that milestone? 30. And if it's within 3 miles from the water, how many? 25. 25. Thank you, Maria. Has to be 25 years. But the integrity reserve study, they're doing them right away, thankfully, because they need to. You got to remember who's on the board for these. Who's on the board of the condo associations, guys? The homeowners themselves. And these old buildings, a lot of homeowners have been on the board for a long time. And they're like, we've been paying. We got plenty of money in there. We don't need to. And they've oftentimes cut back those reserves, haven't they? Because they don't want to keep paying. And that's what's happened. That's why a lot of times you don't have enough money to fix the buildings. Because the homeowners that have been on the board for many years decided they don't need to keep paying for those reserves because they didn't actually have a good accountant running them, and they weren't required to. Now, good news, another win, another legislative win. They actually have to have the documents for the last year on their HOA websites too. So the required documents that we have to fight blood, tooth, and nail to try to find and get, that's the other reason why we run from these condo associations, right? We all know it. We're like, oh my gosh. Now they are going to be required to be on the websites. So yes, your sellers have access. They may tell you they don't. They may tell you they don't know how to, but you've got to make them do it because you don't have access. You're not a member of that association. They are all members of the condo association. They're going to need to make a call or do an email or something. They need to get the login. They could give it to you, but that is all going to be uploaded. So all of the documents that you're going to need to have for that listing will be uploaded on that website for the last year. That is a new legislative win. Woo, go us in DC. We all got COVID, but it was worth it. So that's another great thing. Remember, what are people afraid of? What they don't know. Okay. So if you are selling a condo, put that out there front and forward. Forget about the view. Forget about the amenities. Forget about all of that. That's not why people are not buying it, guys. And that's not what's going to get people to buy it. You got to get people to look at it before they can even see the view. And they're not going to look until they know they're not afraid of it. So don't put your head in the sand. That's what they're scared of. We know it. I mean, if you think that they're not, I challenge you to ask 5 people. Why would you not buy a condo right now? That's the first thing they're going to tell you. They don't probably know the name of Milestone Report. They probably don't know the name of the Integrity Reserve Study, but they know, oh my God, remember that building that fell down and now isn't it super expensive? And what are they going to start charging me to fix my building? Right? I mean, they know that. It's been all over the news everywhere, right? So yeah. So you know. Does everybody clear on that? So you've got to be creative with condos. If you have a condo, start screaming about that. And then your incentives that you're offering has got to be about the HOAs and the condo associations, rather. Shouldn't have wrote HOAs. That was late last night. Okay. Now, what is the price of your listing? And I put this up here because I know that we all don't have over $1 million listing, because I have 260 some odd listings and they're not all over $1 million. Sadly, I wish they were, but they're not. So if your listing is in a price point that is driven by financed buyers, we need to start thinking about rate buy downs, because the builders are. And if you're in an area, Winter Garden, Lake Nona, Dr. Phillips, not as much, but still, that has any new construction by you at all, you better do it, because the builders are, right? And the number one reason a lot of people buy these things, these new homes, is because it's easier to get into. They try to make them as easy as possible, right? So you can talk about, listen, there may be no cul-de-sacs left, and you may have the only cul-de-sac, right? That's great. But if they can get in for a lot cheaper because the builder's done a rate buy down, they're going to go with that builder all day long. Listen, if it's Dream Finders, that's a piece of garbage. KB crap. Okay, listen. If you have a resale home, that thing's still standing. So we got a good home. So I'm just saying, listen, just because it's new doesn't make it better. Listen, come to me. I can tell you what the builders are all about. So they can make it shiny and new and make it sound good, but that rate buy down is really what's getting a lot of people in there. They're making it sound better than it is. So what does that look like? Well, this is what they're doing. They're doing, you can talk to your seller and listen, instead of doing the price drop, think about a 2-1 buy down, right? You can make it permanent or temporary. It only costs 2 to 3% of the loan amount, and it can increase the affordability 10%. Now, if you have a $1.5 million home, you're not doing that, right? Doesn't make any sense. But if you're not, and I know we have, like I said, probably about 200 listings that are not, the rest of you who have part of the 200 should be listening, because this is what we need to be talking to our sellers about. And by the way, Chris and Heather Musto, did I say that right? I think I did, who are fabulous. I'm going to be bringing them on to do a class on rate buy downs. Okay. Now, not to say that you need to be an expert at it, but you need to be able to talk comfortably enough to present it to your seller. Okay, that's the key. And here's an example of what it looks like. Let's say the home's 900. And yes, on a $900,000 home, you should be talking about it. Because if they put 20% down, if it's at 7%, it's with principal and interest, you're at $4,789. But if you bought it down to 5.5, they're at $4,000. Do you think $700 a month? That's a car payment.
Gonna get somebody's attention.
Yeah, that saved them $25,000 over 3 years. If you took $25,000 off the price, what do they care? $25,000 off the price, that from 900 goes to 875. That doesn't make a difference, which is what the seller would have done. He would have taken the house from 900 to 875, right? Big deal.
$5.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be $5 versus a car payment.
Mm-hmm. But you could say have your house and your car too. And that's maybe how I would advertise that. You see what I'm saying? You drive an Audi, there you go. You can have your Audi or your Tesla, right? Teslas are cheaper than that. They have some great lease deals right now. Right? I mean, look at that. This is what I'm talking about. This is great. And I'm telling you, for a family, $700 a month is significant. It's a lot more than $25,000 off the price, because if they're financing it for 30 years, what do they care? But they do care about the $700, because $700 could be that car payment.
And that's only 13,500. That's not bad for the 1.5.
So see what I'm saying? It's going to save the seller a lot more money than taking it off the price. And for them, they're thinking like, okay, I could take it off my price, but what do they care if they're financing that for 25 years? They'd rather the savings in the payment. I guarantee you, if you're a finance buyer all day long, you'd rather that. And now you're competing with the builder. Because they're like, ooh, I'm getting this home for 5.5%. Now it seems like a really good deal, right? You guys with me on this?
Yeah.
And it's a 2-1 buy down. And you could do it, like I said, it could be a permanent one or it could be a temporary one. A temporary one would be more significant, but this is permanent. Now, again, I'm going to have Heather. Are you guys interested in having Heather and Chris do it for a class? I'm going to have them do a Zoom. You guys interested in coming to that? Anyone online interested? No?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. Because,
Yes.
great.
Yes, that
I
would be good.
I think that this is the kind of stuff that is going to move the needle, right? And it's then how we advertise it. Because like if you did a social media that says, get this home and your car payment too, I mean, hello, I would listen, wouldn't you? It's about being creative. Now, if you say, and a new Tesla too, people will be like, ooh, is that coming with a Tesla? Now, I'm not saying that the seller's buying the Tesla, but you can show how it could include that, right? That's what you're doing. And you have to have an asterisk and, we'll be like, make sure we cover that basis. But, that's the point too, right? That's what you're showing.
It's back to 2000 and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly. Put your asterisks and roll your interest rate back to 2019 or I don't know when that, yeah, but 5.5%, that was a good time. All right, now here's another one. I love this one. Let's talk about sellers, and this is great, especially for high end too, but any driver. Flip the script. Have your seller make the first move. Don't wait for a buyer to make the offer. Let's make them one. We used to do this a lot. So buyers are cautious today, right? You have all these buyers come to see it, but they're not making an offer, right? And you ask them, what's the feedback? Oh, we love it, but they still aren't making an offer. Now, if they're coming and they're like, oh, all it needs is a cactus garden, that's a special one for someone on. Okay. But right, then you can make them an offer with maybe you pick one person or two people and you say, we'd like to make this an offer with a rate buy down. Don't offer it out there. Don't put it in the MLS. Just offer it to a specific buyer with a rate buy down. How is that buyer going to feel that they just got a special offer from the seller? And now the seller's feeling great because they're picking someone special to offer that to. It could be a closing cost credit or a limited time price incentive. If you feel like, if you're talking to the realtor and you say, is there some kind of price that would make a difference? Are they between two homes? Is there some? And instead of waiting for the buyer to make a decision because they're in analysis paralysis mode, and that is the truth of it, guys, because there's more inventory, buyers are in analysis paralysis mode. Would you guys agree with that? Anybody who's dealing with any buyers, I'm sure you're feeling it, right? So instead of that, give them something better to think about. Give them something to get them off the fence, right? And you could give them some kind of lifestyle package if you wanted. HOA, club memberships, designer furnishings, But make it an offer specifically for the buyer. And your seller will feel like they're the ones in control. Now, here's one. Susan Abshire has got her beautiful home in St. Cloud, overpriced. Are you on, Susan? She knows it is. But they don't want to really bring it down. I don't want to talk about why. It's the sellers. They will probably maybe go down to 2.8. They were thinking, but whatever. But do they really want to bring it down in MLS? It's like this whole thing. Well, Susan knows the CEO of the hospital down there. And there's 6 doctors moving to the area. So she already told the CEO about the home, but nobody was interested in it. So I said, Susan, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to the sellers and you're going to ask the sellers what special price will they be willing to offer just for those doctors, just for that CEO to offer the doctors. We're not going to put it in MLS. This is not a price for everybody. It's just for them. And then she's going to go back and offer them a very special offering just because they're coming through the CEO that she's got this special relationship with, and it's just for the doctors. So if it's even below what they would have put in the MLS, right? It's a one-time thing just for the doctors. How do you guys like that? It's about creating a one of a kind. Now the sellers don't feel like, oh my God, I don't want to put it all the way out there. What if everyone's going to start renegotiating and coming in really low, right? Because they're not doing that. But a doctor who's coming from the CEO, that is a worthwhile person to put that offer through, isn't it? You guys like that kind of an option? So that's what we're doing on that one. Here's another one. With a luxury strategy, this is the whole concept, empowering your seller to choose their buyer. So it's more than a sale, it's a selection. In an ultra luxury market, the seller isn't just looking for the buyer, they're looking for the right steward of the home's legacy. So, a private offer structure. The seller may offer exclusive incentives to the preferred buyer. And they can customize these concessions based on how they want to use it. So it's an invitation to submit a letter of intent, however they want to do it. This is for the luxury sector. You understand what I'm going at with that? Let's go back to that. So maybe you want to say to someone, we're going to be offering you membership to the club at Bella Collina with a designer package of furniture that you can pick out for whatever. So you could customize however you'd like to do this. But the point is, you're picking based upon who's come see your home, what you'd like to offer them. This way, the seller, maybe it's a different price. Maybe it's something about, you know, how you want to structure it. Maybe you want to do some kind of even partly seller financing, whatever you want to do, but it's customized by the seller to a specific buyer. You follow what I'm saying? And then the seller feels they're in control, because especially in the luxury market, they like that more than just like a rate buy down. You follow what I'm saying? Carrie Bellish, are you on? We did this with her seller. She had a very hyper. Care, are you on? I think she was supposed to be on. She wanted the link. Oh yeah, Carrie, you are on. Carrie Bellish. Oh, she's not coming up. But her buyer, we were talking about doing this very thing because he was very much a driver and very much a control freak. So we talked about him deciding which buyer he liked and creating a custom offer just for that buyer, which they can do because it's not fair housing. As long as it's not a violation of fair housing, they can pick one buyer that they want. They're allowed to do that. Just like they could pick a multiple offer. They could pick whatever offer they want, right? Well, if people are coming to look, they could say, I think that you would be the perfect person for this home. Now, how does that make the buyer feel? Super special, right? That's the whole point of this. You want the buyer to feel special. You want the seller to feel in control. It's a shift on mindset. And that's really why it works too. Now, I can't say it's always going to work, but it's pretty, we've used this for a long time. So you have to, it's just a paradigm shift. Instead of sitting around waiting for people to offer to you, you can offer to them. Questions on this?
What if you're not getting any showings to go after a buyer?
Then you have to be creative and figure out what is it about the home that you can sweeten the deal with. What is the price point, right? Where's the price point? Got to figure that out. If it's below the price that you have finance buyers, I would start with the rate buy down. Because are you competing against new builds? Remember, new build inventory is at an all-time high. And guess what? It's about to get higher. So you got to see who your real competition is. A lot of people don't consider the new builds, and they're desperate too, by the way. So, you have to consider all that kind of thing. Like, what is it that is your real competition? If it's in the high priced, then you got to think about things like this outside the box. And you could even offer it, do a social media thing saying the seller may be willing to offer a private structured offering depending on the right buyer. Come see today. Like, you could even put that out there. You could advertise it like that. There's nothing that's violating anything by doing that. People might just want to come and see what the hell that even means. Private structured offering. Well, I should get that. It's like the golden ticket, right? What is a private structured offering? I don't even know what that is, but I want to see, right? The point is, guys, it's about being creative. Who is doing that? Nobody. You need to. Positioning yourself and your listing in a different way than everybody else. That is how you stand out in this market. You need to be different than the slew of other listings, because guess what? Now there's a lot of them around you. If you look like every other listing, you're going to blend in like every other listing, right? Yes, we have better marketing, but it's still just going to be a timetable. If you want to take advantage and stand out, this is how you do it. Okay. Last thing. It's back. We need to also stand out and be above the curve, offering more exposure to a broader audience. So I'm realigning with a company out of Miami, which I'm still finalizing through Carol Medeiros to offer crypto closings. Now they would have to use this company to close. The seller does not have to accept crypto. I still have to verify through Carol's people. Typically what we did was we allowed Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I'd want to clarify with them if it still will be Bitcoin and Ethereum. What happens is the title company takes all the risk. The title company does know your customer, so they verify. The title company verifies that they have enough crypto because crypto is extremely volatile. The title company then, when it's time to close, will be the one to so typically you'll know your closing amount. It could last for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years. It wouldn't matter because the US dollar is not volatile, right? I mean, it is, but not really, right? Well, what happens with crypto is you'll have probably about 15 minutes that you'll have to transfer your monies because crypto is extremely volatile. So when they tell you the amount that you have to transfer at closing, you have a window that's usually about 15 minutes to transfer the funds. Now, they could put it in USD stablecoin, and then you don't have that problem. But so that might be part of their process. I'm still finding all of that out. But typically, like I said, they have 15 minutes to transfer the funds. The seller could then take the money and put it into a US dollar. That could be just regular cash. Or if they'd like to take it into a crypto fund, they can. They can put it into a Bitcoin, or these are the things I'm clarifying what types of crypto, the currency they will be working with. This opens up our market in a really awesome way because there's a lot of people in the South American market, in the European market, in the Asian market that have a lot of cash. And we don't have to worry about loonies because the title company clarifies all that. So we still will use forewarn to make sure people are not a bunch of loony bins. We'll still make sure we're clarifying it when we have to verify funds. The title company would be verifying funds, not us, right? Because they're doing the know your customer and all that. You're going to get like a crypto wallet and go, what the heck is this? Is this a cold wallet? Is it a hard wallet? Is it Coinbase? I don't know what the heck I'm looking at. You wouldn't do that. The title company would be doing that to verify funds, right? That's the whole point of being with a title company to do those things. But you would have to use that title company. Everybody go with that? You guys like the idea?
I do.
Excellent. So these are things, guys, that I hopefully will help set you apart, will give you the opportunity. Oh, I didn't admit Shane. Admit Shane. He's maybe been there a while. Oh, shoot. I can't get him in. Why can I not escape? Okay, there we go. Now maybe I can get him in. Admit. Okay, I don't know how long he's been in there. Hopefully these are some ideas that will help move your listings in a creative way, but I will end the meeting by saying simply, now is the time to differentiate yourselves. Not just Sotheby's, not just Premier Sotheby's, you as an advisor, as an expert in marketing, but as an expert in our local market. You have to know your area better than anybody. You have to know what's going on around you. You have to know what your competition is. Is it the neighbor? Is it the community next door? Is it the new builds around the block? You have to know those things to know what best tool to pull out. And if you need help, that's what I'm here for, because that's kind of my area of expertise. So if you have any questions, I look forward to meeting with you guys and going through it. But any questions before we adjourn for the day? I have no gavel. So sad. I love my gavels. I do have it at home though. I can bring it in. Anybody? Any questions? No? Okay. Well, I hope you guys got something out of today. And anybody? No? Nobody got anything. Okay. Well,
Nothing at all.
nothing at all.
Not,
Okay.
not one thing.
Okay. Yes, question? No? Okay. Well, have a great rest of your day, and I'll look forward to seeing you hopefully at Max's open house later today, and take care. Bye.